Thank you for the Institute for inviting me, and thank you everyone coming on Thursday evening to hear my story. I have a very special connection to Dallas and especially Texas. So when I came to America for the first time, you would guess I landed in like New York City or maybe California or San Francisco. No, I actually landed in Tyler, Texas. That was my first impression of America. And then the first stop I made after arriving in Tyler, Texas was in a ranch. They took me to Walmart. And then I saw this gigantic bags of chips. It was a half size of me. And that's I was like, whoa, where I am in the right place to be. Because that's what I escaped for, and I got it. So it was coming back to Dallas today. It felt like almost coming home and coming back to America that as I understood. Of course, after that, I ventured to California and New York City, and I realized America is a very big and vastly different place, and I'm sure you agree. So today, I just want to see how many actually of you read my book. Wow, I love you guys. And so how many of you heard my speech or listened to my podcast? Okay, so who never heard about my story ever in your lifetime? Okay, because sometimes audiences read my story already and they have a lot of questions, so I have to balance that out. And because a lot of you don't know who I am, I'm going to quickly go briefly of how I am standing here today. So now I'm 28 years old. I was born in 1993. That's right after Soviet Union collapsed. I was born in the northern part of North Korea. And I had one sister, and I had two loving parents like everybody else. But however, growing up in North Korea was a very different experience. Growing up, I did not know that I was Asian. Do you know why? Because the regime isolated people to the point that they brainwashed me that I was a Kim Il-sung race. I was not Asian. And we had a different calendar. Our calendar began when our dear leader, the first leader was born, Kim Il-sung was born, not when Jesus Christ was born. And we had also different time zone. So it is basically a different planet. Growing up in North Korea, I've never seen a room like this, chairs like this. We don't even have electricity, not even mention internet. If you ever seen photos of North Korea, satellite photos at nighttime, it is literally the darkest place on earth. And I would sometimes say, well, it's good for the environment. We have Earth Day every day in North Korea. There's no light pollution whatsoever or the noise pollution because 97% of North Korean roads are not paved. So when we hear in North Korea somebody died from car accident, we know that that person got killed by the regime because there are no cars. You cannot be possibly dying from car in North Korea. I was growing up there as a child. Starvation was a daily life thing. And this is where a lot of people don't understand. And Bob, I wrote that book called Socialism Sucks, right? It really sucks. If you live in it, it's very, very bad. One of that thing, a lot of people ask me, there's one thing you got to love about North Korea, give me one. And one that I really sat down, like, what would that be? I do not love anything about that country, but I was like, well, at least there was an intimate human connection because we don't have any digital devices. We didn't have anything other than looking at each other's faces. So I knew how many chopsticks my neighbors had, how many blankets they had. That's how much we are close to each other. But other than that, everything sucks over there. You're not missing too much. So where was I? So I had a family, and growing in that country, complete different law, complete different normal common sense. And regime, even though they decide to found the country in the name of equality and equity, making everybody not poor, that we all living in the same life standard. However, the regime divided people into 51 different classes. And this would be a lot shocking to you because Koreans are homogeneous people. We do not have a lot of racial battles like other countries. Pure genetically same Koreans. And even that, they managed to divide people into 51 different 성분 classes. And before you are even born into the society, regime decides who's going to starve and who's going to have a prosperity in their life, depending on what your ancestors did. So if my great-great-grandparents were the landowners, they say your blood is tainted because in your blood you have a capitalist blood. Therefore, you're going to suffer in the countryside as a collective farmer and die. If your great-grandparents were fought alongside with Kim Il-sung in the Independence Revolutionary War, where you have a great blood in you have a communist blood. So in a big three class, North Korea dividing into people fruits. Wow, we have funny, I love it. So basically, top elite is a tomatoes. Do you know why? Because tomatoes are outside red, but also when you peel inside, it's red. They are true believers also of this communism. Average people in the middle class, they're apples. Might be red outside, but when you open it inside, it's not. So you have to watch them and like spy on them. And the last one are the grapes. They are no red inside, nothing is in their blood, who is a communist. That's how North Korean people, when they're born, strictly, you know what your future is gonna look like. And this really breaks my heart now I'm living in the 21st century of America. I went to Columbia University in New York, and as I said, I'm 28 years old, and I have a son who is 4 years old. He's one of the few people in the world who has a half American dad, who I call American bastard, and half North Korean mother. That's a very unusual match. And somehow this little boy who is so innocent, whose mom was a actually oppressed person, now have to answer to a slavery that happened in this country. Do you see the similarity right now? When I was at Columbia in the classroom, the moment my professor was saying, everything is bad in this America right now. Why? Because of white men. Because there's white supremacy, there's inequality, and the people were suffering and oppressed. In North Korea, exactly the same thing. You didn't choose to do anything during that time, but because your great-great-grandfather was a landowner, now your blood is tainted. That cannot be changed forever. And in school, I did go to school, and the things that I learned were not about, how like the Big Bang, the evolution, or physics, or math. In schools, they teach us how not to trust. This is one thing that still moves me being in America. Actually, this time, I got to my hotel room this afternoon, and I had to get Texas barbecue, right? After all, I'm in Texas, so I got Uber Eats. And then eating it just amazed me, like how these people trust me that my credit card somehow gonna work, and credit cards trust me that I'm gonna pay them back this money. And then they bring me food, but I'm not questioning if there's no poison in it. Do you know how this works? There's a trust. If you don't trust, nothing works. You cannot get money from like credit card. You cannot get food. You cannot get into Uber. You cannot even be on the airplane. The pilot cannot do a good job. In North Korea, they teach you the exact opposite thing. Entire our classroom in every single room in North Korea have to have the portraits of the dear leaders. And the teachers who are standing here tells me, your biological father is not your real father. Your real father is your dear leader here. So who you need to die for is your dear leader, not your father. And in school, they teach us to young children how to watch other children's bad behavior. We don't have vocabulary for friend. And this is the one thing that it concerns me in America right now with this speech code. And there's so much effort controlling what we say. George Orwell wrote in his book 1984. How many of you read that book? Right? It talks about doublespeak. Whoever controls the language, they control your thinking, right? So in North Korea, they control the language to the point they don't teach you the word love. We don't know what romantic love is. Kim Jong-un banned Mother's Day recently because he was worried if the people get to love their mothers, that we are going to be distracted with loving him instead. So he bans love between people. That's how we don't understand what love is. We don't have word for friend, so we have word for comrade because we are all revolutionaries. We don't have for word I, because the worst thing you can be in North Korea is being individualistic. Of course, we don't have word for freedom, human rights. I mean, everything that we have here, they don't have it. And not to mention what gay is. When I came to America, like after my speech, some guy came and hugged me. And like, don't worry, baby, I'm gay. So I did not know what that was. So that evening, I went back to my hotel room, I Googled gay. And I was like, oh, okay. I really had nothing to worry him hugging me that time, but like that. That's how you control the people. You cause the information flow, and you kill the people, whoever disagree with you. And you control the language, and you control the information. And that's how you can have North Korea going on like that for the last 80 years. To the point when people ask me, like, are North Korean people are so dumb? Like, why are they not like rising up? Why there's no revolution in North Korea? And I'm like, how do you fight to be free if you don't know you're oppressed? Right? Like, how do you fight to be free if you don't know you're a slave? Even the point, like when I'm living in America right now in New York City, I have a lot of college friends who is going to Ivy League schools telling me how they're oppressed. And I'm like, you know, baby, if you're oppressed, you would not know you're oppressed. That's like complete wrong definition of oppression. By the time when I was 13 years old, in 2007, we couldn't live in that country anymore. We were really hungry. As you can see me right now, still I'm like about 80 pounds. Do you know North Koreans and South Koreans are the same people? Because of malnutrition, we are 5 inches shorter than South Koreans. 5 inch height difference. Actually, you are seeing one of the tallest North Koreans right now. Believe me on my high hairs. I usually say if I were born in America, I would be a model because I have a son who proves to be a 99 percentile in his height. And like doctors like, is that your son? Like, or is your brother? Like, it's my son. I'm not his nanny. And like, how is he so big? It's like because of malnutrition. It's funny, but it's not funny because like in a world where everybody's getting longer and live longer, in North Korea, nobody dies from cancer. Because disease, like other things kills you first, like starvation and infection. And our average life expectancy is less than 60 years old. And this is, we are talking about 21st century modern world, that it's not like dark ages. So in 2007, I was desperate. How am I gonna get out of this country? And luckily, I was living in the border town of North Korea. And at nighttime, there were electricities coming out of China. And that's when I thought, maybe if I could go where the lights were, I would find something to eat. Initially, I wanted to escape with my one sister I talked about, who was like a few years older than me. And then I had a very bad stomach ache. So my mom took me to the hospital. And here again, in socialist paradise, you would think everything is free, right? Yeah, it's free, but nothing works. Doctors literally rubbed my belly that afternoon. No x-rays, no CTs, nothing. Oh, he says, maybe you have appendix. We have to remove it. It's going to burst. So they cut me open without any anesthesia. They use a beer bottle as a drops. And if you don't buy penicillin from the black market, you cannot get any medicine from the hospital. People don't, again, die from disease, they die from infection. From our room to outside the bathroom, we don't have indoor bathroom, right? There were like piles of dead bodies in 2007. And you see these small children are like chasing these rats, are like eating humans. And somehow rats eating human eyes first because it's the softest part. And you see children chasing rats, and then these children eat the rats and then die from disease. Then rats eat them back. This cycle goes back and forth. And that's the moment I decided I had to do whatever it takes to get out from that place. And a few days later, I got out of the hospital, and my sister was gone already. She escaped with her friend. I took with my mother, and I found a lady who would help me to go to China. And I did not question why this lady was going to help me, because you're so desperate. I mean, there's really no point why, even if somebody doesn't help me, there's no point even asking why, because I was not about to die anyway. So in the middle of the night in March in 2007, I crossed the frozen river into China. Right now, actually, escaping from North Korea became impossible. Have you ever met North Korea in your life before? You have? Okay, so one person, you're the unicorn. I thought I was. Because, well, over the last 80 years, so far only just over 209 North Korean defectors have made it to America. So it shows how hard it is. Only just about 200 people escaped from that country in the last 80 years. So I was, now Kim Jong-un put the landmines in the entire border. And with the machine guns, he ordered to the border guys that not one single ant crossed the border. So now you cannot cross the border anymore. My time, at least, we could bribe the guards. So we bribed the guards, and I arrived in China. And first thing I saw was my mother being raped right in front of me. And because in North Korea we don't have a sex education, I did not even know what sex was. And then they told me something unbelievable. They told me, if you want to live in China, you have to be sold as a sex slave. And we were asking, what do you mean? What does that mean you are selling me? And they said, do you know China had a one-child policy, right? That ended recently, and in China you can have many more babies right now. But during that one-child policy, a lot of people wanted boys over girls. So they were killing girls. They were aborting girls. Then what happens when you do that? Millions, billions of people do that. You are going to produce so many boys over girls. So currently, right now, there are over 33,000 men in China cannot find women. So where does this thing go? They buy North Korean girls, and then they sell them to these men who cannot find women. And this is a thing. When people talk about like slavery, like somehow they only think about slavery that happened some few hundred years ago. I'm like, do you know it's happening right now while we are sitting down here? There are 300,000 North Korean girls in China right now are being sold every day. So as a North Korean, when we land in China, there are 4 ways we are being consumed. First way is organ trafficking. They take us to the basement, they take our organs out and kill us and discard us. Second way is brothels. They drug these girls and rape them. Usually they only last 3 to 6 months in the brothels and make money out of these girls. Third one is a town of men or the brothers or cousins buy one girl and rape them until they die. And the last one is usually they find that if they are lucky, one man buys them as a wife or a sex slave and then keep them. In this situation, I was bought by a human trafficker. And then at 13, he told me if I become his mistress, he was going to help me finding my family back to me. I think that was the last time I remember being a kid. I did become his mistress, and somehow he did keep his word. He bought my mom back from a farmer that he sold. He brought my sick father. But by the time I got my father in China, he was very, very sick. So he passed away a few months later. 2 years, I lived like that. And then one day, I met a North Korean defector lady in China. And she told me, there is a way that we can have a life with dignity. And she said, if you go to South Korea, you're going to be free. So I told you in North Korea, we don't have word free. So I was asking her, like, what do you mean I'm going to be free in South Korea? And she said, literally, in South Korea, you can wear jeans, can watch K-dramas, and you're not going to be arrested for that. I think this is a thing, like in America, a lot of people like have no clue what freedom is, right? Even the fact you watch your Netflix, that's what people get executed for in North Korea, watching a foreign movie. Having a long haircut gets you going to concentration camp. That's how little liberty we have. So I asked her, like, how do I go to South Korea to be free? And that was actually crossing the frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia in 2009 when I was 15 years old. And there were missionaries who were helping us. And this is a little bit funny and ironic story. Their missionaries came to China from South Korea and helping North Korean defectors. And their prize was helping us was us believing in God. And I asked them, like, what is God? What is Jesus? And they were like, oh, God is this almighty person who gave us his son to die for our sins. And when we die, we're going to join him in the paradise forever. And I was like, that's very familiar. Because do you know, Kim Il-sung copied the Bible. So that's a lot of people don't understand, like, how North Korean people are so like brainwashed. Kim Il-sung literally made himself a God, that he can do miracles. He knows how much hair in my head. He knows what I think. And because he loved us so much, that he gave us his son, Kim Jong-il. His body died. We all know that. But his spirit lives with us forever. And when we die, we go to socialist paradise with him. But I became a believer. And then we did cross the frozen Gobi Desert. And I didn't die from the cold or the soldiers. And I made it to South Korea. Many years later, I realized why my country became that way. Initially, my hardest thing after North Korea really was how to trust again. So like in South Korea, the people told me, you know what, like Americans are not bastards. They are great people. And do you know Kim Jong-il is a fat dictator? He's not starving. And they told me that I was oppressed and it was a bad country. And I was like, so if everything that I believe in North Korea is a lie, then how do I know what you're telling me is not a lie? Like, how do I know? George Orwell books helped, reading Animal Farm in 1984. And one thing that made me to decide to speak out, and that is when you read that book, Animal Farm, it's not about how the Napoleon, like the pigs killing other animals. Do you see that, like, next to all the oppression goes on, at the end, there are young animals are being born. And they have zero clue what the life was before the revolution. And in America, a lot of people talk about, like, I'm so afraid that we're going to lose freedom, right? But to me, what scares me is that, what if we didn't even not know the time that we were free? What if we distorted like history so much that we even are thinking freedom is a possibility? My father passed away not knowing life could be this beautiful. He did not know that he had a rights as a human being. That is my biggest regret for him. Not because he just died from like animal there, but he had no clue life could be this way. So because of that, I am today speaking out and telling the people the value of freedom and why it is so important to understand the individuality. Why we should not go into the North Korean path where trying to fix everything and create a society that everybody's results are the same. Because that is the greatest evil we can see. Nothing has been more terrible than big, gigantic, bad governments to the humanity than ever. Have you ever seen a human beings can drive each other toward the worst? No. all the tragedy happened because when people not watching out, big governments are consolidating power. I'm not like here teaching you about political party. Just from my experience, government is worth watching out for because they can get us in trouble very, very badly. So I'm very grateful that you came here today to hear my story, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.